welcome to another Career Coffee Chat. My name is Gurpinder Grewal and I am a career sport peer with Advising and Career Services Humber. Today's conversation will be focused on equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, which is referred to as EDIB. And I'm really excited to be joined by Tamar Faber. Hi, Tamar.
Hello.
She is an EDIB Learning and Development Specialist. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. So before we get started, Tamar, can you please let us know a little bit about yourself, your background, and your experience working as an EDIB Learning and Development Specialist?
Yes. Hello. Firstly, hello. I'm really excited to be here, as I said. Thanks for that nice introduction, and I'm excited about the work we'll be talking through today. So, as you mentioned, I am Dr. Tamar Faber. I have been at Humber as the Learning and Development Specialist in the Office of EDIB since February of this year, so just under a year. And I have been in higher education for about 12 years. So I like to go back to my master's days when I was a TA in media studies, and that's really when I started to understand the nature of higher education and start to pay attention to the structures of universities and colleges across the province, specifically the university that I was at. After that, I was faculty at Sheridan College for about 10 years. At the same time, I was also doing my PhD in youth culture and hip hop culture, which I finished up in 2023. After the birth of my son, my second kid, I really thought, you know what, I love the classroom. I do love the classroom, but I was really ready for a change. And again, keeping in mind those passions that I aligned to, thinking about structures and policies and the way educators educate, that was really what brought me to this role. I've always been attuned to the structures of racism and gender discrimination, religious hate, marginalization in society, and also consumerism and sort of our relationship to consumerism. So this path to the Office of EDIB as the Learning and Development Specialist was really, it felt like a very natural path from not only my professional experience, but also my personal, my deeply personal values. The work that I do here at Humber is specifically with faculty and staff, and it kind of takes a bunch of different forms. So I do workshops teaching faculty and staff about EDIB principles. I help faculty and staff troubleshoot their EDIB issues, whether that's in the classroom or in their day-to-day work. And then our small but mighty team at the Office of EDIB, we're really working to embed EDIB across the institution's policies and practices every day.
Alrighty, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And my first question is focused on students who are preparing to enter workforce. EDIB sometimes feels like a big concept. So how would you explain EDIB in a way that helps students understand why it's essential across all workplaces?
Firstly, before we continue on in this conversation, I do want to just say that you're exactly right. Like, EDIB is a big concept. It can feel like this big and scary thing that oftentimes people don't even want to address, so it feels more natural to avoid and ignore it. And the work that we are doing is very nuanced and complicated and ever-changing, right? Like, things change from day to day. We probably aren't going to answer every question, tie everything up in a bow today, and that is okay. A lot of the work in EDIB we're encouraging so that people feel like they are empowered to take it on is that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not be perfect. Being willing to try new things, and as long as you approach your interactions with the right intention, that's the most important thing. So, like, as long as you're sort of communicating your intentions properly, it's okay to kind of make mistakes and give each other support and support each other. And those are really the tenets of EDIB that we encourage, especially students who are entering the workforce, to just feel empowered to know that you can give a little bit of grace to yourself. When we talk about EDIB, those kind of buzzwords, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, they're more than just buzzwords. Of course, they have, official definitions. Equity essentially means fairness by removing some of those systemic barriers in order to give everybody a shot at success. Giving everybody what they need to succeed by removing some of those systemic barriers that are in place. Diversity comes from bringing different perspectives and experiences to the table. Inclusion is about ensuring that those voices are not only there, but they're actively valued, they're supported. And belonging takes it one step further by creating that kind of psychological safety, those safe spaces for people to really feel like they can thrive and that their experiences, their opinions, their identities matter in any given space. The current state of EDIB, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, especially in the workplaces in North America, is in a funny state. You know, it's a little bit insecure. There are shifting politics in the world that again go back to like making it a little bit more uncomfortable to, you know, to show yourself in certain spaces. That hostile climate kind of around EDIB has, there are people who feel like maybe that is trickling down into workplace culture. For the first time in over a decade, Canadian companies are reporting less on some of their diversity metrics, such as the percentage of women on boards and in executive roles. This is partly influenced by again, shifting politics in the States, and this has really created uncertainty for EDIB professionals, for people in HR, maybe people in social work, right? Like any of those kind of like related fields. But that, again, like I mentioned at the beginning, that some of these things are nuanced. Like there is a nuance here, and that nuance is that even though disclosure is down, research also shows that Canadian organizations are committed to EDIB because it drives innovation. When you have diverse teams, when you make people feel like they belong and they can share their opinions in meetings and among colleagues, they are more productive, they are empowered to innovate, and they stay at the workplaces that they're at because they feel like they're valued, right? So these are employees who feel, when they feel like they belong, and I'm reading because I have the stats here, when they feel like they belong, they are 10 times more likely to be engaged, 5 times more likely to feel psychologically safe, and 14 times more confident in leadership decisions. And we also see that this is a growing trend for, and I'm assuming Gen Z potential employees. They are ranking EDIB as a key factor for what they're looking for in their jobs. They want to feel like these workspaces are open and they can feel safe and valued. So ultimately, EDIB is not just something that's good for one person individually, but it's good for everyone. When everyone has a chance to succeed, not only do people feel more satisfied in their work, but the organizations succeed as well. And when we're talking about workplace and all of those things, at the end of the day, when we understand the business imperative to be profitable and all of those things.
I really liked how you explained EDIB in simpler terms, and I think it will especially help students and new grads to succeed in their careers.
Yeah, and in the office, we have been intentional about simplifying some of those definitions so that, you know, when you boil it down, like it's not a scary concept, and in fact, it's good for everyone.
Yeah. My next question is, a lot of students worry that they don't have formal EDIB experience. So what are some ways students can still show their understanding of EDIB during an interview?
This is a great question, and I think it ties into some of these conversations around fear and being nervous around these concepts. And one thing I want to say is that I want to trouble the idea of formal EDIB experience, right? You don't need to have formal, like, experience in the way that we might understand experience. It doesn't need to have taken place in the workplace. Like, what it really comes down to is your values and the way that you see the world and how you treat others, right? So you could talk about your teamwork, right? Do you listen to different perspectives? Do you believe that everybody's voice should be heard? Have you had experiences in group work here at Humber even, where you're dealing with different kinds of people and having to respect whether it's different cultures or different languages or, you know, the kind of dynamics that happen in classrooms and in group work? Has this happened in your personal life, at work, you know, if you have any other kind of work experience? Have you done your part to make people feel seen and feel respected for who they are? If you can think of times like that, that is a great example, showing your values and using some of your educational experience to display that. Can you think of a time where you learned from somebody or adapted your own perspective based on something that you learned from someone else? Again, what it comes down to is showing curiosity, showing respect for those around you. Talk about your values and your willingness to learn about different perspectives. Showing your EDIB knowledge and kind of awareness and formal experience comes in many different forms. Another way is inclusive language. So making sure that in interviews you're avoiding slang or You never know what people are dealing with or who they are or what they're experiencing in real life. So trying to make an effort to use language that isn't ableist, right? So when you say something like, let's jump into this topic, or that's insane, that's crazy, like these are things that assume people's full physical and mental abilities when we never know exactly what people are dealing with, right? So it might sound like a small thing, but they make a big impact when you are just showing that you're curious, willing, and respectful of those around you. And that as an EDIB professional is a great way to show that you're aware of the world, really.
I totally agree with you, and I think people often underestimate how much experience they already have through everyday situations. So I feel like that's just the case.
Absolutely. Like taking before an interview, if you just take some time to think about who you are and your own culture and how you grew up, and it doesn't matter where you're from, like we can all, again, like when we talk about equity, it's really about removing those barriers so that everyone can succeed, right? And everybody has different things that they need to succeed. And when you think about your own identity and your own culture, like doing some thoughtful introspection will land you in some of these places where you realize you need to respect people from all walks of life.
Tamar, I have often seen one question that comes up in most of the interviews is, how do you help create an inclusive team environment? So when you hear that question, what kind of answer do you think really stands out to interviewers?
Yeah. What strikes me about this question is the idea of inclusive team environment. And when we talk about inclusion, we are talking about the systems and the policies. And therefore, when we're talking about an inclusive team environment, if someone in an interview were to be talking about systems level strategies, I know they really understand what inclusion means. So yes, it's about making people feel included, but the work that we do in the office of EDIB and also the work of inclusion is getting people to understand that inclusion is the work of leaders and policymakers and decision makers. So if you demonstrate that understanding in a job interview, I know that you are definitely on the right track. And on that note, it isn't necessarily about just saying that you treat everyone equally, but it is more about an awareness of the structures in place that often act as barriers for underserved people.
I have always encountered this question in almost all the interviews I have had in the past, and I think the idea you presented is the practical way to deal with this kind of question. Thank you for sharing that. Another question is, what does inclusive communication look like, and how can students demonstrate it, either in their school projects or even at work?
This is also a great question. I like this question because it's like really about personal responsibility. At the office, we say, start with self. So empathy is a great place to start when it comes to inclusive communication. For students in group work, it could be asking things like, does this work for everybody? Does this time work for everybody? Does this platform, if we're going to communicate on Teams or Facebook or I don't know, does this work for everybody, right? Like checking in with others to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the path forward. It also means, again, using inclusive language that respects people, so avoiding assumptions about people's identities, steering clear of slang, and choosing words that everyone can understand. Another thing that this is causing my mind to think about is the concept of intent versus impact. And intent is what you mean to say, right? Like, so your goal, whether it's in a meeting, in a conversation with colleagues, or through your group work, intent is what you mean to say. Impact is how that message actually lands with the other person that is receiving, the person receiving the message on the other side. Good intent, your intent might be good, and that is important. And also we have to be mindful of how it's going to be received on the other side. So just sort of like being aware of these things when you're talking to people around you. And again, making mistakes is part of the process. That's okay. If we all agree to have grace for each other, then making mistakes isn't going to be like the end all of whatever you think it might be. if we give grace to each other and understand that our intent is there, then if we work on that impact piece, that kind of inclusive communication really does flow. And again, that's when like people feel safe to share their ideas, even though they might be a little out of the box. And that's when innovation happens, and that's when creativity kind of steps in. And these are all things that really contribute to like success and fun and like all of those pieces.
Those are really great examples, and I feel like these examples will help students prepare strong for future. My another question is for students who want to be more intentional. So what are some simple ways they can integrate EDIB into their daily lives so that they are actively contributing to more inclusive workplaces?
Yes, this is also another great question. It was just to kind of educate yourself, really, you know, like read articles, listen to podcasts, attend webinars, follow thought leaders in the equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging space, just to kind of stay up on the knowledge, and also give yourself some tools and strategies that you can use every day. I mean, we're all plugged in like all the time. Instead of scrolling 12 hours a day, maybe one of those hours is listening to an EDIB podcast if this is something you're interested in, right? And then the second kind of piece is challenging bias. And what do I mean by that? I just mean within yourself, right? So looking kind of introspectively, looking into yourself and asking yourself questions like, where might my own perspective be limited? What identities or experiences am I overlooking? These reflections actually might help you recognize that there are assumptions that you make every day and stereotypes that you may hold, and we all have biases, and we all, you know, that's the idea of bias and stereotype, is these are shortcuts that our mind takes, right? So we might not even realize that we hold these assumptions and biases and stereotypes about others. So beginning to ask yourself kind of questions about where your perspective might be limited, and that is a good way to start to notice, like, you'll be surprised. And I'm speaking from experience. When you start asking yourself these questions, you start to understand kind of those systems and structures that are in place that have led you to where you are, right? And if you can acknowledge that we all have some privilege and we all might be marginalized in some way, then you can start to put some of these pieces together and grow your EDIB knowledge in ways that, you know, you never thought you could.
I really appreciate how approachable your suggestions are, and thank you for sharing these suggestions. So as we wrap up, do you have any final advice or tip for students as they prepare for interviews or step into workplaces that value inclusion and belonging?
Yes, I do have tips because I came prepared with all my notes. I really think that when you're getting ready for interviews or you're starting out in a new place, all of these elements of EDIB, the E, the D, the I, the B, they really aren't just buzzwords, but they are a way of thinking. It's a mindset, right? So prioritizing inclusion, for instance, can take shape in all parts of your life. It's about fairness. It's about different perspectives. It's about creating the kind of spaces where everyone feels like they belong. You don't need formal experience to show this. You don't need formal EDIB experience to show this in your interviews. Talk about times in school or your volunteer work or some of your part-time jobs where you made sure everybody's voice was heard, or you adopted your perspective to include something that you learned from someone that you know. Again, using inclusive language, avoid assumptions about people, and ultimately show your curiosity by saying things like, I'm committed to learning about more inclusive practices, right? Like acknowledging that there's no final answer and it is really ongoing learning. And at the end of the day, don't just talk about it, practice it with your friends, practice it with your family members, check for input from people that you know, check for understanding, amplify diverse voices and ideas when you have a chance. And these small actions really show that you're ready to help workplaces thrive.
That's a really great advice, and thank you for sharing that. I feel like it will help students to prepare strong for the future and then succeed in their careers.
Yes, that is definitely the goal.
Thank you so much, Tamar, for joining us today and sharing your insights. This was such a valuable conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was fun. Happy to always be a line of communication for you and anyone who needs it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who is watching or listening us. We will see you next time with another Career Coffee Chat. Take care. Bye then.